It's a Saturday night on November 5th, 2005. You've now burned through most of your snacks, you've prepared for the night as you start to wind down. Naruto has just finished, and then Toonami will be premiering something original and totally brand new. Their own original series. Now, you've heard quite a lot about this series through its promotional material, and while it seems like it's not your cup of tea, you're still somewhat interested. So you watch it, and yeah, it's nothing amazing. At least when comparing it alongside the likes of Dragon Ball Z and Naruto. That being said, it's still fun, but you're also excited for another reason. This is a big step for anime as well as Toonami. For a good portion of your life, anime has been somewhat underground and niche. It hasn't really reached mainstream success in America, unless we're specifically talking about Dragon Ball Z and maybe Sailor Moon. But now we are about to see something new for anime, as well as yourself and the fandom you've become a part of. In the beginning, you were made fun of for liking this anime thing, but now, slowly but surely, it's being accepted. And so, with this new series, it seems as though a new era is about to begin. Maybe these Japanese studios are about to get more amazing anime backed by American money. Surely, this can only mean good things for Japan, and especially anime moving forward, right?
This is the manifestation of every dream of those who wanted anime to go mainstream.
See, I believe Lazarus wasn't doomed from the start, but I do think it got derailed somewhere along their way. But what exactly can I say to prove all this? Lazarus opens up with,
"How will the end of the world come upon us? A man named Dr. Skinner developed a miracle painkiller known as Hopna. It dominated the market instantly, and it freed people from all suffering. 3 years ago, Dr. Skinner vanished without a trace.
When the world needed him most, he vanished.
Hopna was a grand trap that he set upon us all."
what the hell is this? While the premise itself isn't terrible, what they've done here feels kind of bizarre. I know a few of you might compare this to Code Geass: The Leash of the Rebellion and its opening, but I'm afraid I have to disagree here. In Rebellion, the opening is just setting the stage for the story to come, but in Lazarus, they've told you the biggest plot point right out of the gate, and I don't think that's a good thing. It's as if setting up a big mystery only to reveal its biggest secret at the very start. I think the show could have benefited greatly if it had shown us Dr. Skinner developing his drug and then releasing it, followed by a series of scenes and cutaways revealing to the audience that he's a really good person, and then at the end of the episode, have him announce the true purpose of Hopna. Because as it stands, how are you, an audience member, supposed to hypothesize what events are to come next? This could have been a mystery that the series could have established early on. Because if a story tells you that there's a miracle drug that can cure anything, surely there's a side effect. But all might not be lost. So long as the cast can carry the story, everything should be fine. We first meet Axel, our leading man in his prison cell. He's been called out for a visitor. This visitor is Hirsch Lindemann, an official-looking lady who is offering to free Axel from his current predicament. It's at this point in the story that a good question is raised. Who is Axel? This is an individual from a government agency, or at least it appears to be, and they're willing to hire him. A second question is, what did he do? The story establishes that he's in here for multiple life sentences. So that begs the question, why is he in prison for this long? All of these questions and more will not be answered or even remotely pondered, because right now we need to break Axel out, even though only a few minutes have passed in the show. Okay, but at least this part's going to be interesting. Seeing as though Axel should have a hard time breaking out of a maximum security prison.
Is that going to be hard to do? Actually, it's going to be super easy. Barely an inconvenience.
Would you mind taking these things off?
Wait, you're serious? This is a high security prison, and he's basically just able to walk off the premises? Okay, to be clear, he doesn't just walk off, but that's what it feels like. The only thing we can get out of this is some interesting animation, which, yes, I'll talk about later in the video. Honestly, if they were just going to bust him out and not use paperwork to release him, I would have preferred seeing the entire Lazarus team show off their skills by helping Axel break out. Maybe have their hacker, Elena, break into the security system and mess with the cameras. While that's happening, have Chris simultaneously flirt with some of the guards outside to distract them. Then have Leland positioned outside with a drone to pick up any outside activity. This would give you plenty of wiggle room to show off Axel's parkour and his abilities as he escapes prison. But that's just my opinion on how this scene could work. Let's just continue. Surely there's a better episode that will expand the story and characters. Let's see, nope. Nada. Definitely not. Not this one either. No, no, no.
Sadly, we're back to square one.
Okay, what's going on in this show? Nothing is getting us further into the plot. Now, normally, this wouldn't be a problem if this was an episodic type of show. But the problem is that this isn't that type of show, and it's most certainly trying to be. Let me explain. Oh wait, I don't have to. There's a fucking time limit posted at the end of each episode. So clearly you have an overarching goal that needs to take up 13 episodes. But this particular argument of mine doesn't always hold true. There are plenty of shows that are episodic in nature with a handful sprinkled in throughout the series that focus on the overarching plot. A really good and recent example of this would be something like Spy Family. In Spy Family, the story does focus on the overarching plot for the first few episodes, but then after that, it diverts into an episodic structure, only to return to the plot in the final episodes. It is perfectly fine to have an overarching plot while simultaneously having your series be episodic. This is a great example that you can do both. So, what's wrong with Lazarus? Well, Episode 1 starts off okay enough, introducing you to the world, the premise, and its cast of characters. This is fine, as it's just the initial episode. Episode 2 is where things start to not pick up. Like, at all. The entire episode is just a wild goose chase, only for it to end anticlimactically. It would have been fine if it added another piece to the puzzle, but it doesn't. The entire second episode feels like a big time waster. As in, and I'm not even kidding, you could skip it entirely and not miss anything. The only thing that it establishes of any value is that Axel, our main character, is a Gary Stew. The man somehow escaped prison, let's see, based on what we're told, let's do the math real quick, carry the 1, carry the 5, 296 times. Okay, how? In any other scenario, you'd be lucky enough to escape once, much less 295 more times. At this point, they should have put him in the lowest level of the prison and kept him in solitary confinement. I find it highly unlikely that in this futuristic sci-fi world, they didn't have an option to keep him in. It's as if they came up with the idea, but then didn't think about the logistics of this plot point. Episode 3 is... yeah, that one. This is the episode where Axel and Doug visit a homeless encampment to see one of Axel's old friends. They are trying to dig up information on one of Doug's old professors, this professor having worked with Dr. Skinner. After finding this professor, he tells them about Skinner's grandmother and her baklava. Yeah, this episode also feels like a time waster. Why is that? Well, simply put, why have a character who seems important to be sidelined for a character that will never show up again? The only thing we learn by the end of this episode is that Skinner is watching them, I guess. Why didn't you have Claude, the professor, talk about Skinner and the development of his drug? Or maybe perhaps you could expand upon the previous notions of Skinner's character by giving us the point of view of somebody who once assisted him. Throughout the series, it's stated multiple times how much of a saint Skinner is. But what if he wasn't? Or rather, what if he wasn't as perfect as the story makes him out to be? Even in real life, people's perceptions of each other can differ depending on several different variables. And anybody in the public light isn't so squeaky clean. So it would make sense to expand on that. But instead, we have this out-of-nowhere detour. Add to the fact that this part seems to be inconsistent with his character. How can Skinner be so absorbed in his own work, while simultaneously having the time to argue about something as insignificant as his grandmother's baklava? Episode 4 fares no better. It sends our team on a wild goose chase that ultimately leads nowhere, when initially you were under the belief that it held some secret. This is what I mean when I say the plot has almost nothing going for it. It will bring up some random plot point that you think is going to lead somewhere and have some revelation, but in the end, it doesn't. Like in the following episode where they infiltrate an executive's office. You could have the group learn about the development of Hopna, or you could have learned the pharmaceutical company struggled to get it from Skinner. Not to mention the fact that you could have added skepticism from scientists about the drug's use. Let's think about this again. A miracle drug that can cure anything. That almost sounds too good to be true. But nothing is built off of anything in Lazarus. So then you get to episode 7, which includes the amazing plot point as save the environment. Oh, because I haven't heard that one before. Wait. Hang on a minute, guys. The world is ending. Because of a mad scientist, they have to find him before time runs out. This is just the plot to Blue Submarine number 6.
In the near future, one man is despised above all others.
The world will not be destroyed.
It will merely change. A brilliant scientist who decided humanity wasn't worthy of inheriting the Earth.
Mankind has grown too large.
Wonderful. Is there anything left of this show after this point? Oh, thank God. So, we finally reached the final 4 episodes of Lazarus, and this is where things finally start to pick up. An assassin is hired to kill Axel to cover up the events that would expose the US Army and the development of Hopna as a weapon. As it turns out, Skinner found out about this and tried to expose them. On his way there, he was caught between a crossfire between the US Army and airport security, and was shot. As well as a weaponized version of Hopna was exposed to the open air, killing civilians. And as it turns out, all members of Lazarus, well except Hirsch, were there. And therein lies our biggest plot twist of the entire show. And it would have been worth a damn if the series had bothered to build up to it. But the way in which it was written doesn't allow for that. And it almost feels like this plot point comes almost out of nowhere. Occasionally some characters will mention an incident, but that's as far as it goes. It would have been far better if some of the characters had mentioned certain injuries that they sustained at the hospital or even an airport. And then slowly we, the audience, as well as the characters, uncover the fact that they were all there at the same place. It's astounding that Elena, the hacker in the group, never uncovered any of this. Anyways, the assassin is dealt with, and they finally find Skinner, who, get this, was at the homeless camp the entire time. Wow, that's amazing. Or it would have been if it wasn't so blindingly obvious in episode 3. And I would say this might have been clever like 30 years ago. But the internet exists, and people sniff this out immediately. So even if you didn't catch it, somebody else did, and then showed it to the world. Add to the fact that he's sitting right in front of Doug. So no, this isn't some kind of mass revelation. It's more like, well, it's about damn time. And so the elusive Dr. Skinner is finally caught. He writes down the formula for the cure, and then immediately dies.
Okay.
So we're not gonna dedicate any time to getting to know the ins and outs of Dr. Skinner. Everything we've been told about him for the most part has been secondhand, though, and everything said about him described him as the world's greatest man, with never-ending kindness in his heart. Would have been nice to get some insight on his character. Is this really where we're gonna leave everything off? And to add insult to injury, the series ends off on an ominous note. Ever since the start of the series, each episode is counted down by showing us how many days remain at the end of each episode. Because of this, it does give the series a bit of tension overall, as the cast of characters have a small window to save their world. However, I feel this barely comes up. It's when the final episode finishes that we're left with this final message. There are 0 days left for us. Wow, thanks for the cherry on top of this shit Sunday message. But there was still a way this could have worked. Make us care about the characters in this world. But the story can't even do that. Speaking of which... Alright, I have a trick question before we get started. What are the names of the main characters of Lazarus? Oh wait, you already knew their names, but that's only because I've been talking about them. If I showed you a lineup of these cast of characters before you watched this video, you wouldn't be able to tell which characters were which. Only a select few people who watch the show know these characters, and that's me being generous, by the way. There's nothing about this cast of goobers that stands out. Let's start with Axel and go from there. Outside of being a Gary Stew, what do you really know about Axel? His likes, his dislikes, his dreams. Was there anything about his character that stood out to anybody aside from...
Parkour! Parkour! Jump over the camera. Parkour! Parkour!
Why was he determined to break out of prison so many times? The story's explanation is that it's his hobby, but it's such a random activity that it almost begs answering. Yeah, normally you wouldn't need to know why a woodcarver is a woodcarver, but when a man's hobby is breaking out of prison, then surely there has to be a reason why. They tried to create Spike Spiegel, but failed to understand why his character works so well, and why he's so special to a lot of people. And it's not like it's a backstory either.
No, going with the flow is where it's at. And that's the dandy way to live.
Even though he doesn't have any backstory to speak of, I still understand Dandy for the most part, proving that you don't need an elaborate backstory to improve your character. But alright, let's move on to a character that's even more shallow than Axel. What can I say about Chris? Honestly, almost nothing. We know from later episodes in the series that she's a Russian agent, but nothing is ever built up to that revelation. It's not mentioned in passing, and you can barely tell that she has any of these skills that any agent would. The best thing I can say is that in one episode she's able to pinpoint Axel from way up high and fire at him. Aside from all that though, you'd be hard pressed to discern anything else. In episode 8, Chris is captured by her former comrades, and the Lazarus team has to rescue her. Once Axel finally makes it to her, she requests him to leave her there, believing herself to be unworthy of being rescued. This is strange though, because the show doesn't make any effort to explain why she wouldn't be worth saving. It's slightly implying that she's done terrible things, without actually showing you what she's done.
I'm not worth saving. Because
Nobody gives a crap about your past. I don't want to hear about it. I don't care.
Excuse me, Axel. I would like to know. Moving forward, we have Leland, whose overall involvement could have definitely been improved. Later on, it's revealed that Leland is in fact a mole implanted in the Lazarus team to make sure they're on track to find Dr. Skinner, and not wasting time on their own gains. Now, this would have been fine if the story had bothered to brought up any of this in the first place. You would obviously have to reveal Leland's role early on, but in exchange you could have Leland skeptical of his teammates until later episodes. Show us him growing closer to his teammates, because as it stands, his position as a mole doesn't stand out and just comes kind of out of left field. Add to the fact that he's an aristocrat and comes from money. This could have played an important role in episode 4. The group has to make their way into a rich influencer's party and don't have an easy way to get into the VIP area. I could have easily seen Leland pull some strings behind the scenes and get them in, but it never comes up, and he has to dress up like a girl, a particular trope that I've personally gotten tired of, but that's just me. Doug almost has no character traits except for being really smart, but then again, I feel that this also barely comes up. The series isn't given near enough time to develop its main cast of characters. Elena is a hacker, and that's it. Yes, she comes from a cult and a complicated family, but there's nothing about her character that carries any substance. The only character who has any depth or substance is probably Hirsch. But keep in mind when I say this, I'm comparing small puddles to a slightly deeper puddle. Her relationship with Dr. Skinner would have been somewhat interesting to explore, but they never did. Maybe she was in love with him. The series somewhat implies this, but maybe she was someone who just looked up to him and respected him, as the rest of the world did. But then again, was he always the good person that the series kept implying? Perhaps we could have seen a more outspoken and angry Skinner from Hirsch's perspective. But at the end of the day, this is all just wishful thinking. And so now you see it. A half-baked story with a rushed finale. But even in spite of that, the characters could have held it up. But they can't because they're too shallow. And so what are we left with? Nothing. Well, that's okay, because at least we have good animation. It's totally okay, because even if the characters can't tell the story, the animation definitely can. And from what I've heard, the animation of Lazarus is absolutely stunning. Which is where we get to the next segment of the video.
I break out of prisons.
A lot of people online will give the show a pass because it has so-called stellar animation. And I'd like to question if they've seen good animation in the first place. Yes, Lazarus has a couple of good moments here and there, but overall its animation is completely lackluster. Let's get to the chase and talk about the opening act.
Right there!
So, is this what people are seriously calling good animation? When I watched this for the first time, a few things bothered me. One of these things is how weightless Axel seems to feel. I heard the guy that directed the action for John Wick helped with Lazarus. But when it comes to Lazarus, Axel almost has none of the weight that Keanu Reeves does. In these films, you'll find John bobbing and weaving, throwing punches, and performing his martial arts. His weight is moving with him. However, Axel has almost no weight. It's as if he's fighting on the moon, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what else was wrong. So I asked my friend of mine, the anime collector, what he thought, and he agreed with my assessment of Axel feeling weightless in his fights, adding that he defies gravity. But AC also pointed out that this entire scene, there was hardly any tension between Axel and the guards he was fighting. A good, and yes, almost too obvious example of this is in Cowboy Bebop. and its first episode in fact. While in pursuit of his high bounty, Spike ends up facing off against Asimov, and right off the bat we see it. There's tension, there's build up even before the fight starts, and then the camera starts moving. It shows us different angles as the fight progresses. Where is any of this in Lazarus? These moments are fewer and far between within the show. With how many fights that happen, there's maybe 3, if we're being generous, 4 moments. Another scene that's a good example of not very good camera work and choreography is the elevator scene.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
Gee, I wonder where they got the inspiration for this. Oh, okay, that's not fair. Plenty of anime, including Cowboy Bebop, made homages to other media. But instead of being a cool Easter egg, it's making me want to watch the other media it's copying from, which isn't a good thing. If my response is, oh dude, look, it's like the Winter Soldier scene. Man, I'd rather be watching the Winter Soldier right now, then you kinda messed up your scene.
I break out of prisons.
Because Axel is consistently invincible throughout the show, and there isn't any tension to be had in this. Heck, even Captain America, the super soldier, struggled when he was fighting the agents of Hydra in the elevator that the scene is copying from. But Axel, our Gary Stu, hardly breaks a sweat. And when you add this up all together, it ends up looking not great. I can hardly tell what's going on in this scene. The only time that the good animation and choreography come up is later in the series, starting in episode 8 when they're on the oil rig, and episode 9 and onwards when it involves the assassin. But at this point it's too little too late. Everybody is checked out except for the diehard fans. And when I say fans, they're not necessarily fans of this show specifically. They're more fans of Watanabe or Toonami. Say what you want about Ninja Kamui, but at least in its first few episodes, the choreography and animation were spectacular. It's why when it did go up in flames, because it relied so heavily on CGI, people like me were really disappointed, because it had potential. But Lazarus, straight out of the gate, practically has none of this. When watching through the show, you start to wonder if anything about the story in the world that Lazarus was trying to set up had any thought put into it. Like, why was the Lazarus team the only group set out to find Skinner? In a situation like this, multiple countries would be set out in multiple groups to find this individual. I find it highly skeptical that nobody considered this when writing this show. Not to mention, when Lazarus is trying to look for Skinner, they don't have access to basic things like FBI and CIA databases, groups that already have some information when looking through his house. But in episode 3, they're expected to find something that more than likely was already found by a different government agency. It's also incredible that the world at large isn't in shambles. It seems like people are just going about their day, when actual large cities, at least some of them, should be upturned by riots and upheaval due to the situation that's occurred.
Stock prices? You're doing money-making stuff right now?
It's time for you to take your position as head of the Astor family.
Huh?
And as mentioned before, it would have made significantly more sense if Lazarus was in fact being run by a pharmaceutical company instead. They wouldn't have access to government databases because they don't have access to government databases despite being on the government's payroll. Add to the fact that they have a world-renowned hacker in their group. It's astounding that they don't have access to basic information about people like Skinner's grandmother. As a result of this, my suspension of disbelief slowly crumbled away.
Being a story crafted by Watanabe, someone who I am a fan of, Samurai Champloo and Cowboy Bebop being one of my favorite animes of all time.
Detractors like my good friend Monty here will tell you that this is a misstep for Watanabe. But here's a bit of a revelation for you. He didn't write it. What do you mean? His name is right there at the end of the first episode. Yeah, but have you checked the other episodes? Huh. Interesting. So, I barely see Watanabe's name associated with anything outside of episode 1. Which tells me he probably had barely any involvement except maybe coming up with the concept for Lazarus. At least as far as the story is concerned. And to be clear, I understand that it takes multiple people to make a show. Just like it takes a village to raise a child, essentially. But this proves my point. Add to the fact that people who talk about the show don't really bring up the fact that this is an American-made anime. No, this isn't an anime being subject to American sensibilities. This is a fully blown American production. Produced by Americans, for Americans. Do you see the man listed as executive producer? That's Jason DeMarco. the man responsible for the rise of anime in the West, or at least one of them, being one of the co-creators of Toonami. And this is the same man who claimed this about his other anime baby, IGPX.
At the end of the series where they finally kiss, which again was a bit of a contentious thing in IGPX because Hongo didn't necessarily think they should kiss, because in a lot of anime the love is unrequited between two characters. There's a lot of like crushing with no resolution. So he was sort of like, oh no, they're not gonna kiss or anything like that. And I was like, yes they are. We're gonna build a relationship between them that will culminate at the end, and that's how it's gonna go. And then eventually he saw my point of view and agreed, and he was happy with it.
This is him on record stating that he had a hand in writing part of IGPX, despite the fact that he has no writing credits in the show. Yes, he could be lying, but I doubt it. When you think about it, producers have some sway over the director and creator. This also applies to movies as well as TV shows. So, it's not that large of a leap in logic. With this in mind, do you believe me now when I say that it was DeMarco who actually wrote portions of Lazarus, alongside the other writers? Watanabe himself, I believe, was hardly involved. He came up with the concept, and that was about it. He probably had a hand in some scenes here and there. And I would think that would have been completely fine if they had hired other competent writers to help on Lazarus. Ask yourself, did the dialogue between Jill and Doug feel natural? Alongside the bizarre commentary on cryptocurrency, does it fit with the nature of this anime? To be clear, these things by themselves aren't horrendous, because in actuality, the biggest flaw lies within its writing, and not the concepts themselves. While watching this, it honestly feels like the first draft. And right there, in black and white, there lies the biggest flaw. The characters aren't fleshed out, the story, at least at times, feels all over the place, and its messaging is piss poor. Adult Swim / Toonami wanted Watanabe to make them another Cowboy Bebop, but they failed to understand what made Bebop so good in the first place. Actually, it fails to understand what makes anime so good in the first place. Just look at Watanabe's other works. Now ask yourself, did this man, who made other amazing series, create this lackluster knockoff of his previous work? Maybe, but I believe he didn't. I'll say it again. It was made by Americans for Americans, with Watanabe attached. He just came up with a basic idea. It's a shame because back in 2005, American anime could have been something. We could have signed off on some ideas Japan didn't want. Ideas that were too different from Japan that America could have gone for. And if you want a good example of American anime, look no further than IGPX itself. I encourage you to check it out. It's most certainly different, but it definitely still feels like anime. That's because it was made back when America was still making stuff like this.
Is it Voldemort?
Do what must be done.
But now we have American anime when America is famously creatively bankrupt right now. But maybe the pendulum is due to swing back in the other direction. Perhaps we can start producing shows that are far better. Only time will tell. But in the meantime, Adult Swim, stop making American anime. Until next time, guys. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, I'm still on the road to 10k subs. If you like anything I had to say here, click the like and subscribe buttons. And if you really like what I said, leave a comment down below explaining why. And if you didn't, also leave a comment and explain why. Thank you so much. Take care.